The legend has returned, folks. Sung Jin-woo, our favorite overpowered protagonist, is back for season 2, and this time he's trading his nap schedule for some high-stakes drama. Smash that like button and leave a comment for part 2, because the adventure is just getting started. Sung Jin-woo's day starts with a rude awakening, literally. His sister, Jinna, calls him early in the morning, shocked to find out that he's still in bed. After all, saving the world doesn't exactly come with a flexible schedule. She reminds him of the parent-teacher meeting at her school that afternoon. Jin-woo, realizing he's completely forgotten, panics and rushes to get ready. When he arrives at the school, Jinna's shock isn't limited to his tardiness. She's stunned by his appearance. Jin-woo looks polished and sharp, the kind of guy who could walk straight onto a runway. Her astonishment is echoed by the girls at the school, who whisper excitedly, calling him handsome. Their eyes sparkle with admiration, and some even try to sneak photos. Jinna, ever the teasing sister, suggests setting him up with one of her friends, but Jin-woo playfully pulls her cheek and tells her to quit joking. Inside the teacher's room, the pair meet Jinna's teacher, who is practically glowing with pride. She hands Jin-woo Jinna's progress report, praising her intelligence and politeness. She's a role model for her peers, the teacher says with a smile. To top it off, she reveals that Jinna's excellent performance on a recent mock exam has opened the door to medical school. Jin-woo, clearly proud, nods along. However, the teacher advises him not to put too much pressure on her. Then, the conversation takes an unexpected turn. The teacher brings up a hypothetical scenario. What if Jinna awakens as a hunter? Jin-woo's expression hardens as he firmly states that he would never allow her to enter such a dangerous profession. The teacher, unbothered by the tension, moves on to ask Jin-woo for a favor. To talk to one of Jinna's friends, Song-yi, and convince her to return to school. Later, Jin-woo meets Song-yi, who recognizes him immediately. She's less interested in hearing about Jinna and more focused on declaring her passion for the hunter's life. Jin-woo, trying to reason with her, points out the harsh reality. As a low-ranked hunter, she can't make a stable living. Sure, you made some money with our strike team, but that was a one-time thing, he says. Song-yi, undeterred, snaps back. Weren't you an E-ranked hunter once too? Jin-woo, realizing this argument won't go anywhere, invites her to accompany him to a gate, saying he has something to show her. Meanwhile, Fang Dong, a high-ranking and bitter member of the Hunters Association, arrives at the airport. His mission? Revenge. Dong is here to settle a score with Jin-woo over the death of his brother Dong-sung, whose team Jin-woo had wiped out during a previous raid. When asked about his stay, Dong makes it clear he doesn't plan to linger. He's focused on his target and doesn't care for subtlety. A Hunter Association member discreetly monitors him, wary of his intentions. Back with Jin-woo, he prepares Song-yi for her first raid at a C-rank gate owned by the White Tiger Guild. This gate is typically used to train freshers. The team includes King Chu, an A-rank tank who makes no effort to hide his disdain for working with low-rank hunters. The team lineup consists of an A-rank, 5 B ranks, 2 C ranks, and Jin-woo and Song-yi as the only E ranks. King Chu scoffs. How long are we going to stand here talking? You know this isn't a field trip, right? I can't believe I'm babysitting E ranks. Jin-woo, unfazed, silently hopes the dungeon's dangers will convince Song-yi to rethink her career choice. As they step into the gate, Jin-woo senses something off. Suddenly, the C-rank gate transforms into a red gate, a deadly anomaly that traps hunters in a dungeon disconnected from the outside world. The only way out is to defeat the dungeon's boss or wait for a dungeon break. Jin-woo tries to take Song-yi out of the gate, but the exit is sealed. Outside, White Tiger Guild leader Bak hears about the red gate and rushes to the scene, visibly shaken by the news. Inside, the team finds themselves in an icy wasteland. Snow stretches as far as the eye can see, and the cold bites through their gear. Jin-woo explains the grim reality of red gates to the group, and the mood turns somber. No one can help us from the outside, Jin-woo says. We're on our own. Just as the group starts strategizing, an ice elf ambushes them, firing arrows. Jinwoo leaps into action, catching an arrow mid-slight to save Songyi. But another team member isn't so lucky and falls to the elf's attack. The elves recognize Jinwoo's strength and retreat, but the damage is done. King Shu takes charge, dividing the team into smaller groups for survival. However, he refuses to take weaker hunters with him, declaring, "We need to focus on those who can fight." A B-rank hunter, Park, decides to join Jinwoo instead. "Kim didn't even notice the arrow," she says, "but you did. You're no E-rank, are you?" Kim's group heads toward an open field while Jinwoo's team ventures into the forest. The tension escalates as Kim's group encounters ice bears, powerful creatures that overwhelm them despite his leadership. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's group faces the boss of the ice bears. Jinwoo summons his shadow soldiers, but the battle proves challenging. His strongest soldier, Igris, finally steps in, defeating the boss with precision and power. Jinwoo marvels at Igris's strength, thinking, "He might be stronger than me." As Dong continues his search for Jinwoo, he learns of the Red Gate and assumes Jinwoo won't survive. Inside the dungeon, Jinwoo's team celebrates their victory, but their relief is short-lived. The ominous presence of a new, more formidable enemy looms in the shadows. And that's it for episode 1. Will Jinwoo and his team escape the icy dungeon, or will they fall prey to its relentless dangers? Stay tuned to find out.
In Tenekai General Hospital, there's one department where impossible cases converge. Patients with untreatable illnesses, murders even the police can't solve. Genius Dr. Takao Ameku tackles the unthinkable, revealing the hidden truths behind these mysterious diseases. Prepare to enter a world where medicine meets the unknown, and the cure is only the beginning. Dr. Ameku Takao was busy typing articles in her cramped office, which contained so many books that the local library had begun drafting a complaint. She was a meticulous doctor who analyzed everything in excruciating detail, from rare diseases to people's questionable anime obsessions. Her girlfriend had offered to join the group, but was too afraid to blow. Meanwhile, Tenekai General Hospital welcomed a frantic mother and her gravely ill son. The mother insisted that her child had been suffering from relentless vomiting, blurred vision, and agonizing headaches for weeks. None of the clinics they visited could uncover the cause. Dr. Takanashi, oozing professional confidence, calmly assured her they were waiting on test results. Junior Dr. Mai chimed in that although antiemetics and suppositories had relieved some symptoms, the boy was still reeling from dizziness, nausea, headaches, fatigue, and limb pain. Dr. Takanashi scoffed at other clinics for not diagnosing the child's obvious symptoms, speculating it might be a rare neurological disorder or a congenital genetic defect. When the test results came back suspiciously normal, no elevated creatine kinase, no rhabdomyolysis, everyone was baffled. The boy also complained of kidney pain, which only added to the confusion. Amid this chaos, another patient arrived with severe abdominal pain. Dr. Takanashi gave him a quick once-over and asked if he had consumed anything suspicious. The patient shrugged, so they ordered more tests. Abdominal scans ruled out food poisoning and appendicitis. Sensing his confusion, Dr. Mai asked why a physician from investigative pathology was helping the emergency department. He explained that he was moonlighting as a temporary assistant because the place was as busy as a sale on half-present stethoscopes. Dr. Takeo, often mistaken as Takeo's twin in hospital gossip, then burst into the room. Dr. Mai, eager to impress, introduced herself as Kanai Mai, a first-year resident hoping to learn from the legendary Dr. Takeo. Dr. Takeo that 2 patients remained undiagnosed and insisted on personally cracking these cases. Dr. Takeo, unflustered, agreed and resumed her analysis. After reviewing more data, Dr. Takei examined the sick child. She spotted a vitamin supplement bag in the mother's purse and quickly deduced hypervitaminosis A, caused by excessive vitamin intake. This led to the child's escalating symptoms: kidney pain, headaches, nausea, and dangerous intracranial pressure. When asked how the child could overdose on vitamins, Dr. Takao listened to the mother's guilty confession that she had given her son loads of vitamin A, hoping it would improve his vision. Dr. Takao explained that unbridled vitamin A does not grant superhuman eyesight. It grants a trip to the emergency room. She told her to stop at once before the boy sprouted night vision goggles. Moving on, Dr. Takayo faced the second patient. She politely asked if he had eaten any freshly caught fish. The patient admitted he had. Spotting a tanned face, a hat, and a small hook wound on his finger, Dr. Takayo deduced he was likely a fishing hobbyist. He probably ate a fish straight from the water, unknowingly ingesting a parasite. She directed Dr. Takayo and Dashi to call gastroenterology for an endoscope to remove the unwelcome guest latched onto his stomach lining. Dr. Mai stood there, mouth agape, impressed by Dr. Takao's swift detective work. Dr. Takao gave a modest shrug. After all, diagnosing obscure conditions was far more thrilling than tidying her office, which was still engaged in a cold war with the neighborhood library. Dr. Takanashi was calmly reviewing patient charts when Higashi Kurumi's emergency services called about a construction accident near Kurumi Lake Park. A man had lost his lower left leg and gone into cardiac arrest. The paramedics performed CPR, and Takanashi hurriedly prepared saline and blood supplies. When the patient arrived, everyone gasped at the gruesome wound, which appeared more like an animal bite than a construction injury. As tension gripped the room, a syringe filled with bright blue liquid fell. The paramedic casually announced that the patient's blood was blue, leaving the team as stunned as if they had just witnessed a cat perform open-heart surgery. Dr. Taku then appeared, eager to uncover the truth. The police arrived soon after, asking her to step aside because they still had no explanation for the bizarre incident. Taku instead offered information in exchange for being included in the investigation. Later, she invited Dr. Mai and Takanashi to her home to research possible culprits, suspecting a large predator. Takanashi advised, leaving it to the police, but Taku, proud of her investigative pathology role, refused. Suddenly, Taku's department director called, warning her to drop the case. She argued that investigating medical mysteries was her job. Undeterred by orders, she and Takanashi visited the accident scene, where the police pretended they knew nothing about blue blood. Taku reminded them she had seen high-level officers with Detective Naruse. Flustered, the police hesitated, but eventually followed her lead. She guided them to Kurumi Lake Park, pointing out a nearby museum under renovation. The officers theorized a wild dog had caused the injury, but Taku scoffed, noting the bite was far too large. She then unveiled a giant dinosaur skeleton. Forensic experts, alongside Sekirai, Dr. Takao, and Takanashi, confirmed a perfect match between the ancient teeth and the victim's severed leg. In a stunning twist, it appeared the deed. Everyone stood there, questioning their life choices. After all, no one had signed up for extinct reptiles wreaking havoc in Tokyo's parks. Dr. Takao calmly explained that she had deduced the cause from the unusual nature of the wound and her own observations. She reasoned that such a massive bite could not be from a creature common to modern land or waters too distant for a shark. In short, she believed something extinct was responsible. Sakurai acknowledged her deduction, while his friend blurted out a theory that the museum's dinosaur skeleton might have moved on its own. He then demanded to know why the patient's blood was blue, insisting Takao had left out key information about the skeleton. He recalled seeing it nearly assembled on Friday, but work had halted due to rain. By evening, it had been fully completed. The victim was a 23-year-old ex-convict who, after his release, was discovered trespassing in a gang's building. A construction foreman named Manabe, troubled by the halted work and a feeling of unease, had found the mutilated body during his rounds. He called Hakashuka Clinic, hoping the local doctor could help, but the leg was gone, and the victim's heart had stopped. Takao later visited that clinic, finding it deserted, until Dr. Hakashuka finally appeared. Takao, identifying herself as Tanikai General Hospital's pathology director, asked why no treatment was attempted since the clinic had a surgery room. Hakashuka insisted it was impossible. The clinic was closed, there were no nurses, and the victim's condition was beyond help. Takao then told Sakurai she planned to have the crime lab inspect the museum grounds. She suspected a vital piece of evidence remained there, hinting at a larger mystery lurking behind the immediate crime. Kotori asked if Takao had seen suspicious men at the scene. Takao recalled men who looked like Yakuza and connected it to a recent shooting in Narima, which could threaten innocent people. She said the Fort Division, an often overlooked organized crime unit, was likely involved. Even as questions about blue blood and extinct predators swirled, Takao made it clear she saw a bigger case behind the severed leg. She intended to uncover it, even if others remained tight-lipped with their information. After identifying the body, they discovered that Komadi was the Yakuza's target. The police suspected that the Yakuza had killed him in an act of revenge, which triggered a swift investigation. Sakurai suggested that solving the case so quickly was typical of Dr. Takao. He then mused that the Yakuza member who shot Komadi might already be dead. Dr. Takao quickly corrected him, clarifying that the shooter was still alive, though seriously injured. He was the vice leader of a small Yakuza gang currently in conflict with Komadi's gang. Komadi had fled after being shot, but eventually he was captured, tortured, and killed. For now, this was their theory, though Dr. Takao hinted she had her own theory, one she wasn't ready to share just yet. At the museum, Dr. Takao wasted no time spotting a crucial clue: blue blood. They found it in a storage room, and Sakurai's friend wondered aloud if Komadi had been killed there. Moving into another room, Dr. Takao was taken aback by the sight of a dinosaur skeleton. After a brief pause, she declared that she had a diagnosis. Before anyone could react, a man rushed in, startling everyone. Dr. Takao pointed out that they needed to connect all the dots: blue blood, a severed leg by a Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Narima shooting, and the mysterious blue stains in the storage room. Things were starting to come together. Takanashi explained that the condition where blood turns blue is called mehemoglobinemia. This disorder occurs when hemoglobin oxidizes, preventing it from carrying oxygen properly. It causes symptoms like difficulty breathing and weakness, and in severe cases, it can be fatal. Dr. Takao added that this condition arose in the victim after he was shot, possibly due to exposure to substances like procaine. She also noted that the second-in-command of the rival gang, who was injured as well, likely had a similar condition. As the investigation continued, they uncovered Dr. Hakushika's involvement. Dr. Takao confronted him, pointing out that he had reacted nervously when she mentioned the museum. "Everything in there bears your fingerprints," she said. Hakushika tried to brush it off, claiming that even if the fingerprints were his, it didn't prove he severed the man's leg or disposed of the body. That wouldn't be enough to arrest him. Dr. Takao calmly responded, stating that he wouldn't be arrested for tampering with or disposing of a body, but for breaking into the museum with the intent to steal. She also warned him that his clinic would be searched after his arrest, and they might find his fingerprints and Komoda's blood there. Defeated, Hakushika collapsed to the ground. Sakurai thanked Dr. Takao for her help, but before they could relax, Hakushika tried to attack Dr. Takao, blaming her for his capture. Takanashi stepped in, using a classic karate move to knock Hakushika out cold. Dr. Takao, not one to miss a chance to make a point, yelled at him for calling her a child, and kicked the already unconscious Hakushika for good measure. With the case wrapped up, Dr. Takao suggested they celebrate their success with a study session. Takanashi, amused but exhausted, agreed. Just as they were about to settle in, Masaru, Dr. Takao's older sister, showed up. She scolded Takao for ignoring her phone calls, eating too many sweets, and staying out late. Masaru dragged Takao away for a stern lecture, leaving Takanashi to tidy up and prepare for whatever unusual adventure came next. And that's how today's episode ended. Viewers were reminded to stay tuned for the upcoming episodes, and not to forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with all the upcoming anime. The story opened on a stormy night at the Demon Lord's castle. Lightning flashed dramatically. Perfect timing for the Demon Lord to call forth his 4 generals: Almandra, the Flame Bearer; Sylphid, the Storm Conjurer; Genomi, the Barrier Knight, and a special soul from another realm who would supposedly serve as the guardian deity of water. Much to everyone's surprise, this special soul turned out to be just an ordinary salaryman from Japan. No one could figure out how he ended up there, least of all the salaryman himself, Uchimura. In his previous life, Ukimura was that typical fresh college graduate who spent sleepless nights hunting for jobs. When he finally landed one, he worked tirelessly without ever earning any praise from his boss. His superior, fed up with what he saw as a useless employee, shipped him overseas to manage a factory construction project on his own. Against all odds, Uchimura actually pulled it off. But no sooner had he succeeded than his boss sent him to another country for the same gig. Feeling disheartened, Uchimura found himself in the middle of the street, questioning his very existence. Right before a rogue scooter, Scootikun, as he'd later call it, slammed into him from behind. Next thing he knew, he was in a fantasy world, face to face with the final boss, the Demon Lord. Normally, someone summoned to a fantasy world would be greeted by a radiant goddess or a handful of holy priestesses, given a fancy sword and told to go save the realm. Not Uchimura. He found himself listening to the Demon Lord's villainous monologue. The Demon Lord radiated an aura of malice, but got straight to the point. He wanted Uchimura to join his demon army as one of the Big Four. On top of that, he gave Uchimura the prestigious job title of Overseas Expatriate. Confused, Uchimura wondered why anybody would choose a loser like him when so many more qualified people existed. That was when the Demon Lord started rattling off Uchimura's hidden achievements. It turned out he had done a thorough background check, learned how hardworking Uchimura truly was, and decided this salaryman needed a proper boss who would appreciate him. Uchimura admitted it was nice to finally get some recognition, but he wasn't exactly jumping for joy at the thought of becoming a demon general. Before Uchimura could politely refuse, the Demon Lord mentioned a few enticing perks: a steady salary, authority matching a director's position, the freedom to pick his own subordinates, and a personalized office. He also assured Uchimura that if he still wanted to say no, he wouldn't hurt him. He would simply send him back to his old world, where Uchimura was technically supposed to be dead anyway. In a twist of irony, the Demon Lord's decent employee benefits and respectful attitude made Uchimura realize something. He might never get a boss this considerate again. And so, against all common sense, he found himself seriously contemplating a future under the Demon Lord's management. Uchimura recalls his bleak life on Earth. Neglected by everyone around him, he had convinced himself he wasn't good enough. With that mindset, he advised the Demon Lord to retract his offer. But the Demon Lord had no time for self-pity and dismissed Uchimura's doubts, calling those who overlooked his hard work fools, unworthy of a dedicated worker like him. Rising dramatically from his throne, the Demon Lord delivered a final impassioned speech. He promised Uchimura that together they would unlock his true potential and reach unimaginable heights. It was the kind of pitch that could sell sand in a desert. Before Uchimura could respond, Almandra, the fiery redhead, cut in, voicing her disbelief. She outright declared that a pathetic human had no place serving the almighty Demon Lord. So, Sylphid and Genome, ever the loyal yes-men, quickly chimed in to back her up. To settle the dissent, the Demon Lord proposed a test of Uchimura's abilities. Almandra, who clearly didn't listen to the part about testing, decided to skip straight to vaporizing him. She unleashed an energy wave that knocked Uchimura out cold, though she seemed ready to do far worse. The Demon Lord intervened just in time, stopping Almandra and revealing that Uchimura was in fact a powerless human. This raised an obvious question. Why recruit a nobody to lead a demon army? The Demon Lord explained that Uchimura's intelligence was precisely what the Big Four lacked, especially in comparison to the walking disaster trio standing before him. Before the Demon Lord could elaborate further, Uchimura regained consciousness, begging for his life. "Please don't let me die at the hands of this pretty young lady," he pleaded. The Demon Lord calmed him down, explaining that his value lay not in physical strength, but in his sharp mind. He clarified that the test would be one of intelligence, not brute force. The Demon Lord laid out his current problem. Negotiations with the surrounding races, like the salamanders and werewolves, were failing due to a lack of competent negotiators. To prove himself worthy of the Big Four, Uchimura was tasked with gaining the Minotaur's trust and bringing them into the fold. For context, the previous negotiator was none other than Almandra, whose diplomacy skills were questionable. If Uchimura had any questions, he was advised to consult her before leaving. Reluctantly teaming up with Almandra, Uchimura followed her through the dungeon toward Lord Tarius, the Minotaur chief. As they walked, Almandra, ever the aggressive redhead, taunted him for his slow pace, calling him an old lady. She doubted he had any chance of passing the test, while Uchimura, though scared, clung to the Demon Lord's words about ignoring negativity. Motivated by the idea of working for someone who actually appreciated him, Uchimura resolved to give it his all. When they arrived at the enormous doors to Lord Tarius's chamber, Uchimura hesitated, intimidated by their sheer size. Sensing his fear, Almandra suggested he open them himself, casually mentioning that Minotaurs were known for trampling people flat. Uchimura briefly reconsidered his career choices, but was interrupted as Almandra flung the doors open. Bright light poured through the opening, and Uchimura, suppressing his dread, steeled himself for the challenge. Inside stood a towering minotaur, its presence alone enough to make him imagine being squashed into a decorative rug. After a moment of silent panic, Uchimura gathered his courage and offered to handle the negotiation. Almandra, unimpressed, stepped forward, claiming she'd show him how a pro does it. At first, her approach seemed promising. She started calm and composed, making Uchimura think she might actually succeed. Then, as if flipping a switch, she began screaming at Lord Tarius. Within seconds, the two were yelling at the top of their lungs, the negotiation devolving into a full-blown shouting match. Uchimura quickly realized that Almandra's negotiation skills were about as refined as a screaming toddler's tantrum. After what felt like an eternity of back-and-forth delinquents, Lord Tarius finally kicked them both out of his chamber. Almandra, desperate to save face, confidently informed Uchimura that the negotiations had started off well, until Lord Tarius just kept saying no. She insisted it wasn't her fault. The Minotaur chief was simply too stubborn to see reason. Rolling his eyes internally, Uchimura let her rant about how hard-headed Tarius was. When she declared she'd done all she could and left him to take over, Uchimura decided to retreat and regroup. The angry roars echoing from Tarius's chamber were enough to convince him to step back and plan. But the terrifying image of the hulking Minotaur kept haunting him, making it nearly impossible to focus. Could he even reason with such a towering mass of muscle? To clear his head, Uchimura wandered into a bar and ordered a drink. As he sipped, memories of his past life resurfaced, particularly the time when his clients had repeatedly rejected his pitches. Back then, he'd learned the importance of persistence and finding common ground. Encouraged by the memory, he downed his drink, resolved to give it another shot, and headed straight back to the Minotaur's chamber. Meanwhile, Almandra marched into the Demon Lord's throne room, eager to report Uchimura's inevitable failure. She argued that choosing him was a mistake, but the Demon Lord, unbothered, told her to wait and see. Frustrated, but unable to argue further, she rushed back to Tarius's chamber, only to find Uchimura standing outside, stuffing hay into a sack. "What's with the trash?" she asked, sneering. "It's not trash," Uchimura replied calmly. "It's my secret weapon for the negotiation." Almandra rolled her eyes and declared that negotiating with Lord Tarius was a lost cause. But Uchimura, surprisingly composed, explained that negotiations weren't about size or strength, but about bridging the cognitive gap between two parties. "The key is eye contact," he added with a smirk, clutching his sack of hay like it was a bag of gold. Ignoring her skepticism, he strode confidently into Tarius's chamber. For the first time, Almandra saw a different side of Uchimura, bold, determined, and far from the quivering wreck she'd met earlier. The next morning, she barged into Tarius's chamber, fully expecting to find Uchimura flattened like a welcome mat. Instead, she found the room in chaos, hay scattered everywhere. Assuming the worst, she groaned. "I knew this would happen." The Uchimura, looking annoyingly calm, informed her that Lord Tarius was already with the Demon Lord, finalizing their merger agreement. Her jaw hit the floor. How had he managed to pull this off in one night? Uchimura explained with a sly grin. "Lord Tarius was always open to negotiation. He just kept saying no to mess with you. He wanted to see how you'd handle rejection, but every time you stormed out, he figured you weren't serious." Moments later, Lord Tarius himself approached them, apologizing to Almandra for his rudeness and thanking Uchimura for his tact. He extended his massive hand for a handshake, a gesture that nearly broke Uchimura's wrist but cemented his success. Having pulled off this incredible feat, Uchimura returned to the Demon Lord, who was all too happy to welcome him as an official member of the Big Four. The Demon Lord presented him with a golden bracelet, symbolizing his new role as the overseas expatriate of the Demon Army. Almandra, while grudgingly impressed, still made it clear she had doubts about his long-term abilities. But there was no time for doubts. More negotiations awaited. Uchimura and Almandra, now reluctantly teamed up, headed off to tackle the next challenge. Watching them depart, the Demon Lord smiled. He was confident that with their combined efforts, his army would soon reach unparalleled strength. And with that, episode 1 of our anime comes to a close. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more episodes of Uchimura's chaotic rise to greatness in this fantasy world. Hence, everything is constantly changing, never the same. The story kicked off at High School 101, where Saito Hojo was strolling to his classroom like he owned the place. Just as he reached the door, Akane, a fellow student he couldn't stand, blocked his path. With all the subtlety of a villain in a bad teen drama, she warned him, "Keep our relationship a secret, or I'll erase you from existence." Saito stood there, utterly baffled, trying to decide if he had accidentally walked into a fantasy novel. He pondered this bizarre new bond with Akane, whom he despised more than early morning algebra classes. Flashback to a few days earlier. Akane was fuming at Saito for turning the class journal into his personal joke book. She was especially peeved that he ignored the timetable and shirked simple tasks like cleaning the blackboard. Saito, ever the underachiever, shrugged off her complaints, claiming the day was as uneventful as a lukewarm cup of tea. When Akane pointed out his strange note about evil spirits in the absence column, Saito dismissed it, saying no one would care. Not surprisingly, Akane wasn't having any of it. Saito sarcastically suggested she dive into some actual books instead, to which Akane retorted that she was trying to improve his attitude. The tension was thicker than a cafeteria milkshake, until Himari stepped in, begging Akane to chill before she turned Saito into her personal punching bag. Still irate, Akane accused Saito of being careless and neglecting his duties, which Saito countered with typical teenage indifference. Himari, sensing a chance to play peacemaker, asked Akane why she always targeted Saito. Akane admitted that his mere presence annoyed her, without offering any logical explanation. Saito couldn't help but sarcastically wonder if he was mentally unbearable, and Akane didn't disagree, probably because she had nothing better to say. Just then, Shizuya intervened, teasing Saito and calling him a poor thing, while giving him a patronizing pat on the head. Grateful for the small comfort, Saito thanked her. Meanwhile, Himari, noticing Akane's relentless teasing, joked, "Are you sure you're not secretly into him?" Akane immediately snapped back, "Not a chance. Even if you were the only guy left, I wouldn't feel that way." Saito smirked and retorted, "Same here. Even if everything changed, I'd never fall for you." Their sharp banter added a humorous edge to their otherwise strained relationship. After school, as Saito was walking home, his phone rang. It was his grandfather, wanting to catch up over tea. Saito, not missing a beat, declined, joking he preferred his books over hanging out with old geezers. But Grandpa wasn't having it. He insisted that he was grooming Saito to take over the family business, threatening that neglecting him now would lead to regret later. Saito fired back with a sarcastic remark, only for his grandfather to act hurt, accusing him of being cold-hearted. Saito quipped that he thought his grandfather was supposed to be tougher. With a sly grin, the grandfather reminded him that refusing was not an option, cleverly leveraging Saito's intelligence against him. Saito, keeping up the jest, asked what would happen if he decided to run away. Grandpa warned him to obey for his own good, prompting Saito to liken him to a blackmailing villain. The call ended with Grandpa firmly telling Saito to get in the car, leaving Saito to wonder where he was being dragged off to. Sitting in the back seat, Saito watched the world go by, pondering his grandfather Tenryu Hojo's legacy. Tenryu had heroically saved the family business from sinking, transforming Hojo Group into a global tech powerhouse despite public backlash. Even in his golden years, Tenryu was still the commanding force behind the company. The driver, breaking the silence, remarked that unlike Saito's father, the president seemed to have a soft spot for him, hinting at complicated family dynamics. When they arrived at their destination, Saito was surprised to see Akane there as well. She explained that her grandmother had called her, but she was annoyed that Saito had to ruin her peaceful lunch plans. Saito, uninterested, told her to stop talking while he read, which only infuriated Akane more. Demanding an apology, Akane vowed to keep bothering him until he complied. Saito sarcastically asked if she would follow him around, and Akane confidently affirmed. Just then, both their grandmothers pulled up in a flashy Ferrari, catching everyone off guard. Saito's grandfather greeted them with casual charm, while Akane's grandmother quipped about how impatient young people have become. Confused, Saito and Akane watched as their grandfathers instructed them to come along. Realizing that the grandparents were speaking about both of them, the two students wondered what was unfolding. They found themselves seated for a lavish meal, where Saito's grandfather proposed a toast, calling the day eventful. Saito, puzzled by the choice of words, remained silent, while Akane, still annoyed, asked for more juice. Saito pointed out her overindulgence, and Akane snarkily claimed she lost her appetite after seeing him. He joked that maybe she was emitting some mysterious substance that made others lose their appetite. She shot back, calling it a waste of good food, and demanded that Saito delete his presence. He replied with a quip about her disappearing into a quantum unit instead. Their grandparents chuckled at the banter, reminiscing about their younger days, while Saito and Akane denied any resemblance. Curious about the purpose of the meeting, Saito finally asked. Suddenly, his grandfather announced that they wanted Saito and Akane to get married, leaving both students speechless. Saito wondered if it was some sort of elaborate joke, but his grandfather urged him not to overthink it. Akane, utterly confused, protested, questioning why they were being asked to marry while still in school. The grandmother suggested that marriage was possible at 18, and the grandfather reiterated his insistence. The grandparents then shared their own past romances, revealing that they had feelings for each other in their youth but never ended up together. Saito's grandfather had married someone else, lived happily, and had lost his wife 10 years ago. Luckily, his grandfather died 2 years later, in 2001. She revealed that her own husband had passed away, and Tenru, Saito's grandfather, had been her rock ever since. Poor Akane, caught off guard by the sudden dive into personal drama, tried desperately to steer the conversation away from soggy sentiments. But the grandparents were on a mission, determined to ensure their grandchildren achieved the dreams they themselves never could. Shio turned to Akane with a hopeful glint in her eye, asking if she would marry Saito just to keep her grandmother happy. Akane shot back a firm refusal, declaring that marriage should be about love and personal choice, not some outdated obligation. Saito, never one to miss a chance for sarcasm, teased Akane about her idealism, but Akane stood her ground, unwavering in her beliefs. She made it clear she had zero interest in this arranged setup, emphasizing that forcing a marriage wasn't something their country condoned. Tenru, anticipating their rejection like a scriptwriter foresees a plot twist, remarked that their refusal was no surprise and that they reminded him of their younger selves. Just when the tension threatened to thicken into an unbearable fog, a stray dog wandered into the conversation. Grandpa, always ready with a quip, joked that if Saito didn't agree to the marriage, the dog would inherit the Hojo group. Saito, eyebrows raised, asked about the canine heir apparent. Grandpa casually explained he'd picked up the dog from the street, adding that while the dog might not be cut out to run a global tech empire, it could at least handle some paperwork by stamping documents with its paw. Saito, unimpressed, quipped that the dog wasn't the real problem here. Grandpa nodded sagely, acknowledging that maybe the Hojo group's legacy would end with his generation. He then mused that a touch of madness was essential to running a company, leaving everyone to ponder the wisdom in that statement. After all, he was the last person to judge whether or not something was wise to begin with. Meanwhile, Akane's grandmother whispered something into her ear, leaving Akane visibly shaken. Grandpa turned to both grandchildren, advising them to take time to reflect and not act on impulse. He generously granted them 3 days to decide, urging them to consider what was truly in their best interests. After the grandparents left, Akane confronted Saito, asking if he was seriously considering the marriage proposal. She was fishing for his reaction, hoping to catch him off guard. Saito deflected the question, turning it back on her and asking for her thoughts. Frustrated, Akane tried to brush him off, admitting she never imagined this scenario unfolding. Curiosity piqued, Saito pressed further, wanting to know what Akane's grandmother had whispered. But Akane was having none of it, insisting it wasn't relevant. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Saito emphasized the importance of understanding both sides. Akane, however, stubbornly shut him down, telling him not to try and figure her out. Realizing his efforts were futile, Saito took a step back, letting Akane take the lead. She declared that she would handle things her own way because it was her future at stake. Later that day, Akane called her friend Himari, posing a hypothetical dilemma. If she were forced to marry someone she didn't like due to family obligations, what would she do? Himari, ever the comedian, joked that the situation felt old-fashioned, but said she would simply reject the idea. Akane pressed her, curious why, only to discover that Himari had a crush on someone else and only wanted to marry him. Surprised, Akane demanded to know who, but Himari coyly refused, instead teasing her about having a crush. Akane, not in the mood for games, shared that she had someone in mind but added with a dark, frustrated tone that she wished he were gone and that her problems would vanish if he just disappeared. Himari, trying to lighten the mood, joked that Akane could marry the person to cut down on living expenses. Akane dismissed the idea, arguing that financial savings weren't a good reason to tie the knot. She then mused about the expectation that marriage leads to children, to which Himari quipped that Akane could have a large family. Akane laughed it off and the two friends continued their playful banter, ending in laughter over their hypothetical scenarios. Meanwhile, Saito sat deep in thought, troubled by the idea of being forced into a marriage with Akane, someone he already found stressful both at school and at home. He pondered his grandfather's unreasonable demands. To inherit the family business, his life would be entirely controlled. If he refused, the company would go to a random outsider. Zishi, sensing his inner conflict, asked him what he truly desired: freedom to live his life or the company's legacy. Saito sighed, expressing that ideally he wanted both. Zishi gently reminded him that life doesn't work that way. Everyone must follow certain rules or instincts, and the best way to thrive is to work within those rules instead of resisting them. Saito, still uncertain, wondered if that meant he had no choice but to comply and inherit the company. Zishi reassured him that no matter what path he chose, she would support him. Whether he struggled or succeeded, she promised to be by his side always. Back at school, Zishi attempted to greet Akane, but she brusquely brushed him off. A few days later, both Zishi and Akane were summoned in front of Tenryu. The grandfather asked if they had made a decision regarding the marriage. Reluctantly, the two agreed to go through with it, though Akane insisted it wasn't out of any affection. The grandparents beamed with joy, having already made arrangements. To Saito's surprise, Tenryu announced they would marry immediately and had prepared a new home for them. Saito protested, but the grandparents assured them everything was already set. Once they left, Saito locked the door of the house, prompting Akane to ask if he was trying to trap her. Saito explained that the door could be opened from the inside, but Akane remained suspicious of the entire situation. After moving into their luxurious new home, Akane was initially impressed, but couldn't hide her frustration about having to live with Saito. Saito pulled together the packages of clothes and placed them on the chairs. As they explored the house, Saito found solace in his personal study. However, when they reached the bedroom, Akane was taken aback to find only one bed, causing a bit of tension. Saito called his grandfather, who insisted that since they were married, they must share the same bed. No alternative options like the sofa were available. The conversation took an awkward turn as Akane accused Saito of having inappropriate intentions, assuming their grandfather expected them to engage in intimate relations. Saito tried to calm her down, assuring her he wasn't interested in forcing anything or taking advantage of her. Still upset, Akane stormed off to her room. Adjusting to their unexpected arranged marriage, Akane and Saito navigated the challenges of living together. Akane resisted Saito's help, accusing him of having ulterior motives, while Saito tried to keep the peace. During meals, Akane remained skeptical, especially about the oddities of their arrangement. Sharing a bed proved uncomfortable as both set boundaries, acknowledging the awkwardness of their situation. Akane explained that her marriage to Saito was merely a formality tied to her personal goals. Throughout their interactions, humor and tension danced hand in hand, marked by playful arguments and misunderstandings. They both agreed to keep their marriage a secret from others, showcasing their reluctance and internal conflict about the whole ordeal. And that wraps up episode 1. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more episodes ahead.